What's up, guys? Hope everybody's having a good day. And today we are going to celebrate the life of a great friend, Teresa Scott, who passed away 2 years ago today. We lost Teresa, but certainly we have carried on her adventurous spirit through our travels and many other things. I want to take an opportunity to honor her life tonight, but also to use her life and example as a lesson for how we can approach the current situation by identifying some of her, what I feel like are her strengths or her personality strengths, and how they might apply right now and why they're so important. So we're going to look a little bit at who Teresa was and how she impacted my life and those that were around her. Talk a little bit about some adventures. We're going to have some fun with it too there. And then we're going to go into looking at some of those character strengths that Teresa exhibited and like I said, what we can take away from those, maybe and what we can apply to the current situation that we're facing today with COVID-19. All right. And, it's interesting to think that this last 4 or 5 weeks in our world has been very chaotic. And I feel like probably similar to some of what Teresa was going through the last several weeks of her life, as things were very uncertain and understanding what was going on and just very unpredictable. And so there was a lot of, probably anxiety. I knew Teresa to be someone who was pretty fearless. And so I think that she was pretty good about not letting herself be stricken by fear. But I think right now we're going through a lot of those similar experiences, perhaps leading up to her unfortunate passing a couple of years ago. And really what we're going to look at is the difference between optimism and positivity or a positive mindset. And we, especially in mental health, we're always pushing a positivity or a positive mindset trait. But I've heard some more information recently, and I've kind of come to understand that I think there really is a difference. And in some situations, a positive mindset can be maybe not the best way to go. So let's look at that. But let's first talk about who Teresa was and kind of start, for myself. I got to know Teresa through the running club in town, and I'm not really sure, I don't remember that initial connection, but I just remember being a part of the running club and noticing that she was a very loyal runner, consistently showing up early every morning, and she was probably the most disciplined, accountable person when it came to that. So much so that you didn't want to be that person that made plans at 5 a.m. and count on her to be the one to cancel, because how you always had that friend who you knew that they would cancel, so the guilt wouldn't be there. Teresa was never that person. You'd always wake up at 4 a.m. and be she hasn't texted to cancel, she's not going to. So that definitely is a testament to her personality traits. But I met her through that running club, and then she, around that time, had started traveling pretty adventurously, and she encouraged other people to go along. And she really had this contagious love for adventure and exploring and discovering and just feeding her curiosity. And ultimately, I was sucked in by that. So I became a part of that and began traveling with Teresa. And, first I want to talk about what I noticed when I was trying to think about, some 3 key personality traits or strengths that stood out about her. And I guess I could come up with more, but there were 3 things that really stuck out. And for me, is number 1 was optimism, being an optimistic personality. Number 2 was wanderlust, which I didn't really know what that word was until I saw some decor about it last year. I looked it up, and it's that unrelenting desire to travel and explore. And I thought of her. I was well, yeah, that's her. She can't contain her desire to go and her eagerness to explore and to try new things. So for me, that was Teresa too. Wanderlust was a great word. And then the third one is reliable. I just felt like she was extremely reliable. And like I said, to the point where if you made a commitment to meet her at 5 a.m. at the trailhead or for some practice training run or something, good luck, because you're gonna go. Like, she's not canceling. So she was absolutely so reliable when it came to that. So optimistic, wanderlust, which I guess is not really a adjective, and then reliability, or three words that really describe Teresa. And I feel like those were her strengths, and I think that that's why so many people sort of found themselves around her so much, because who wouldn't want to be around a person who exuberates joy and optimism, who's eager to take risks and try new things. I guess an introvert doesn't want to be around that person, but yeah. And then someone who's extremely reliable. So you've got also people, someone you can count on. So that's like a great recipe for an amazing friend right there. And that's the kind of person she was. And so for me, she invited me on a couple of adventures before I finally went. And I've been in that position before where I was curious, but my fear overcame my curiosity to be a part of something until the person pushed enough. Like, the way to get me to do something is basically to like tick me off. Like, tell me so many times, or like challenge me, and then I'll finally do it. So finally I went, and so ultimately with Teresa, we ended up hiking rim to rim across the Grand Canyon, and then we went back and hiked rim to rim to rim again at the canyon. We hiked through the Havasu by Indian Reservation, Havasu Falls, and then our last adventure together was through Zion Canyon, the Narrows and the riverbed. And then that was in the fall of 2017. And then there in the following April, we lost her, unfortunately. And so what has happened since is, and we made the vow, and we knew that this was going to happen, that we were going to continue to travel on her behalf. And like, we would go on these trips every fall, and Teresa, she was the orchestrator of these though. And I liked traveling with Teresa because usually, like, I like going places, and I travel a lot, except for now we're not going anywhere, right? But but I would always be that person in charge of doing all the research and preparing and putting the plan together, and then like also being the tour guide as we're on the trip. And I like that to an extent, but there was something nice when it came to the time to travel with Teresa. I liked that all I had to say was tell me when, where to be, and how much money to have. And like, it was very simple because she took care of all the details. Even like, she would be the person that would be up at midnight, like, or 12:01 a.m. on January 1st. Like, well, I guess we're all up then, but while everyone else is doing like partying, she was like getting ready to buy the reservation passes or permits for this like place we were going to go where only 100 people a year are allowed, and like 90 of them don't make it out. So like, that was the great thing. She did all the work, and we just got to enjoy the adventure. But she loved that part of it too. And having gone all these places, it wasn't just about the ultimate destination with Teresa. It was so much about the training and the preparation too, for her at least, and sometimes me, and not everyone in the group, some of you who are watching. But she, like, I remember for Rim to Rim to Rim, I think we trained for 4 or 5 months. Like, I know for sure I did at least 300 miles on country roads. Take me home. No, John Denver. Okay. But like, we did like 300 miles, and I know she probably did like double that. So that was incredible because her commitment to training was pretty awesome. So yes, Michael is watching, and Michael is Teresa's niece, who has gone on some of these adventures, but she is like a super athlete, and so she doesn't have to train at all. That's not really true, but she doesn't train, and then she just goes for the fun, right? No, so Lainey. So some of my adventure friends that still go with me are chiming in here, and actually I'm going to talk about the optimism later because it says it's a passed down trait, and I think it's a family trait, and I love it though. So those are some things about, my relationship with Teresa, how I got to know her, and then our adventures together. And really, what did I gain from it? I love the fact that Teresa had a way of challenging me / encouraging me to face fears, to take risk. Like, she wasn't pushy about it, but she just like gave you that confidence to take those steps forward. And I don't know, I always like, with her and the group we go with, I had this like this confidence, and like this anxiety is lifted. I just feel like, because of the optimism, we're gonna be fine. And so I love that too, that as we would travel with Teresa, I saw her fearless nature, and I just kind of like tried to follow behind that, except for on Angel's Landing, which I froze up and stopped and waited with Gary at the bottom, but that was a different story. So yeah, it's just that fearlessness was pretty incredible too. I could have put that as one of her strengths. I think that definitely was, but I wanted to kind of focus on these threes. So I appreciate the fact that she really pushed or encouraged me to push beyond my threshold of fear, and like overcoming fear of heights. Like it's still there, but it's like more conditional, and I've definitely gained some control over those fears, and I really, really appreciate her being a part of that, because had she not invited me to be part of these adventures, then I would have missed out, first of all, on all these life experiences, but also on the opportunity to grow and and advance my personal strengths and weaknesses. So let's look at the whole optimism and positivity thing. So for me, believing or seeing Teresa as a person who was an optimist, number one, I remember, because every time you would call her, it didn't matter what was going on. Like probably right now, if she were around, you would call and say, like I could call and be panicking and be like, how's it going? Like, or how are you? Wonderful. Like, when I say like, how are you? Wonderful. Like that was just the way she said it. And like every time she was fine. Like she was wonderful every day. Like how can you be wonderful every day? So she had this like way to like put an optimistic spin on everything. Like she wasn't phased. And so I love that. And, so I think everybody knows that about, like, some people even calling her like Miss Wonderful, because she had those go-to phrases that were signs of optimism. And then just the fact too that we would find ourselves in so many predicaments on our adventures that it would call for somebody to be optimistic. Like a positive attitude wasn't going to cut it, because we needed an action plan. But like we needed to be reassured that we're good, like this is gonna work out, we're gonna navigate the course, and we're gonna make it through. And so that was Teresa in those situations. And I remember probably sometimes when her fearlessness and optimism was a little bit questionable, like when she crossed a flash flood in the dark while we were training on a remote country road. And I remember with my headlamp, like she volunteered to go first, and that was her too. Like she would lead the way. So she's like, if we stopped and anyone was questioning whether it was like safe to press on, she would volunteer to go and show us. And so then like we were faced with this flash flood, and so she's like, oh, it's fine, like it's not even that deep. And I'm looking at it like clearly it was unsafe. And so she starts going, and I'm thinking either like she's not gonna make it, and then I have to go get help, or she's gonna make it, and then I have to go to the other side. And then so I'm watching her with my headlamp, and then like so she treads her way across there with her walking sticks. And then I remember thinking like, well, this is great, because I had to go then. So and so that was one of those moments where I'm like, wow, fearlessness and optimism combined, with risk taking, I guess, but it worked out. And there were so many other situations too, though. But in terms of optimism and positivity, like I think there are some differences there. I feel like with right now, and the reason I want to talk about this is because being optimistic right now, I think is super important. And I think being positive, like forcing positivity about everything that's going on right now, can be kind of unhealthy. Like, we have to face the reality thing. The thing I like about an optimist is you can be optimistic and realistic at the same time. Like, you can look at a situation and say, like, this is not looking good, but like, let's break it down and figure out how we're going to work through it, right? So we're going to come up with a plan. And I think that that's helpful because, it's optimism including action. It's not just saying, like, let's just stop here and like paint a rosy picture of the situation. So I believe the optimism too is really built on faith. Positivity is more about like just trying to put spin a positive light on things, or shed a better view on things. But like, optimism is more like that faith and confidence that we can figure it out. And like I said, I'm gonna use that term for like related to Teresa. We can navigate the course and make it through the situation, find another way around, like, and that's moving along too. Like, I think an optimist is resourceful, so they find creative and new ways to do things. Like, let me give you an example of this. When we were in the Zion Narrows, and it had been pretty manageable until we get to this certain point. And there was only one point where like we had to make a clutch decision because it was nearing nightfall, and the water all of a sudden it got like overhead deep. And so there's a big rock, and then there's like this really murky debris filled water, and then there was a cliff wall on the one side. And so basically I had to make a decision, like, you can just swim through it, but like everyone else, we were determined that we weren't going to get in the water. And so like, you could like try to scale the wall, but that wasn't maybe really too realistic. And then I remember finally Teresa, like, everyone else is trying to like figure out how to tiptoe their way through the tulips, and like Teresa had just figured out like that was just not happening, but she had already determined what she was going to do. So she's over here like plotting her own plan. And then I remember her like she throws her bag in the water, in the deep water, and then she just like goes in, and then she swims across, and she's over there waiting for us while we spend another half hour like trying to figure out how we can avoid getting wet. And she's just like, here I am, like, come on. So it was nasty water, yes, Michael. It was not really pleasant water to be in. And in fact, I'm pretty sure like we figured out a way to avoid getting wet, but like Teresa has a way better story. So I just think that was like she being resourceful, and then like she figured out how to package her bag to where it wasn't going to get wet and everything. And then, I mean, we were already in a river anyway, so it wasn't like getting wet was an issue. But so I like that. And then an optimist also is resilient, where, someone who's always like got a positive mindset, could sort of be like fooling themselves, like just trying to sugarcoat something, where an optimist is, like I said, they're resilient to work through something. Like, they might be in a difficult time, but they are persistent and determined to push through. Other differences, optimism, I think, is believing for the best outcomes, whereas, positivity is more like counting on your thoughts to just like fool you into believing it's a good situation. I looked up some articles about this too because I wanted more feedback about the difference, because only recently someone challenged the idea of positivity. And when I think of Teresa, I don't think of like, oh, she was so positive. Optimist, like that to me is so much more fitting. And I think like optimism is looking towards the future, is being able to envision a situation turning out for the better or like improving, whereas positivity is more about like, well, let's look at what we're facing right now and just spin a positive light on it. But it's not really that progressive. It can be, I guess. There's far worse traits than positivity. And then optimism is oftentimes about a situation, where positivity be more like a character trait. And so I kind of think of it like this too. An optimist can be a really encouraging person to be around, and someone who's always positive about everything, like always happy and trying to paint a positive light on everything, like gets away from realism, can be annoying. And so I think like an optimist here's the thing about optimists, like they give you confidence, they permeate confidence, reassurance, trust, like being around someone who's optimistic and with a plan, it just kind of like raises or eases your anxiety and just kind of gives you that belief that it is going to be okay. And then whereas someone like who's constantly positive, sometimes, you know, you might just want to be like, shut up. Like, we need to face the reality situation. So I think that an optimist would win in that situation. So another one said optimism is a trait, positivity is a choice. It said that an optimist gets a trait from an environment or their family. And I definitely see that in Teresa's family. Like, that's just that fearlessness and optimism sort of radiates through her family. Her brother has the same trait. And optimism is about how things will work out versus positivity is about how you respond to something that's probably already taken place or a circumstance you're already in. And then, these are kind of things that I saw as being differences. But I think right now, you know, as far as optimism, having conversations with clients, you know, well, let me back this up. I think the importance right now of just trying to spin a positive light on everything we're facing would be ignoring the severity of it, and would maybe also be removing us from the responsibility we have to take some action, like as individuals, right? And like I just had a conversation with a client right before this who is directly impacted and has a close relative who is in the hospital diagnosed with COVID, fighting for their life. And so among other things, like having been infected by a natural disaster recently, and just a lot of other things that are burdening them right now, that are pulling their lives a lot of different directions and demanding their attention and causing a lot of stress and anxiety. So it wouldn't be appropriate for me to be like, well, let's just paint a positive light on this. Like, it's not that bad. It could be worse. Like, let's look at for the positives in the situation. Now, thankfully, the client was able to identify some on their own, and I just pointed that out to them. But we want to more so try to be optimistic and redirect them instead of like that person where their thoughts are inundated by negative outcomes, like they're manifesting all these negative outcomes in their minds and catastrophizing situations. You know, and I think about like Teresa's like the opposite of that, okay? So most of us, if we would come upon a situation like in the river where it was like deep, murky water, or you scale a wall, or you jump in some like sketchy, deep water, then we would kind of like start to catastrophize the situation and then probably evoke unnecessary anxiety and just make it bigger than it should be. And, you know, I think that with Teresa and being more optimistic, she was like the reverse. Like we make mountain out of a molehill, and then she would take a mountain and be like, well, this is just like a little ant hill. Like, I'm just going to stomp on it and keep walking. And so I think how, you know, that perspective you can put on it is super important. And that was the kind of person that she was. And so, but now, like I said, my client's facing some pretty stressful situations. So we more so want to direct, how are we, instead of saying like, well, let's just pretend everything's okay. Well, how can we consider like, what are ways that steps I can take to get the best outcomes from the situation, you know? And like, I've been having this conversation with people as well. We all have a responsibility during this time of how we respond and the little steps that we're taking as individuals to stay safe, to do things that are, you know, best for the greater good, and just serve our like individual responsibility in the whole matter. And I think that part of that is one thing that's very important is we have to be careful about the feedback that we're allowing into our lives right now. Like, are you watching the news constantly? Are you frequently checking social media or any of the apps on your phone where you're reading about the current circumstance? Because right there, that's going to drown your optimism. Like, that's going to pull you down. It's going to cause you to experience, overwhelming anxiety that's not necessary. Like, anxiety right now is understandable. Fear, worry, like any of those things are completely normal at this time. But we want to be mindful of how much we're allowing in, because we do have control over what feedback we're allowing into our lives. And so I think the optimistic person also sees that they have to watch who they're listening to and what thoughts and voices and different feedback that they're allowing to really set up camp in their minds and their thoughts. And I had to use that adventurous term there, but we're getting some feedback over here as well. Yes, and act as a community too. Recently I've had a lot of enlightening moments, and one of them too, like one was challenging the whole positive mindset thing, because one of the daily mindfulness podcasts that I watch or listen to, people were always responding like, yeah, you just have to remain positive. You have to keep a positive attitude, a positive mindset. And the host actually challenged them and said, like, well, if you try to force yourself to be positive about something that actually needs your attention or to take action, or is it really not, there's nothing good about it, then you're just causing yourself undue stress. Like, that's, you don't want to be fake about the situation. So that's why I think optimism plays a more important role. And yes, the news, honestly, like that's another thing. Watching the news will give you an incredible amount of anxiety. There's this whole other thing. Like we're dealing with the pandemic right now, but there's also this thing, I can't remember exactly, but it's like the infodemic or infopandemic. Like the negativity on the news is just as contagious as, or more, honestly, than the virus. You have to leave your home and go into public and be physically exposed to contract the virus. But you can log on to or get on your computer, on your phone, or turn on the TV, and you can be infected by the mental health contagion of it. The worry and anxiety can stricken you from your own home. You don't even have to leave the confines of your space. So I think that that's really important, and so if you're trying to remain optimistic through the situation, you have to be mindful of what you're allowing into your thoughts, right? And monitor that feedback. And that's where I've been taking some intentional time of silence recently, because there's just too much feedback coming in to process, and it becomes overwhelming. And like, case in point, I can't receive all this and feel overwhelmed and burdened. I can't just look at it and be like, oh, let's just have a positive attitude about it. Like, that doesn't work. Like, it's kind of fake. And instead, I have to be I need to step back and say, whoa, I'm letting all of this affect my outlook on things, and I want to remain optimistic. And so I'm going to pull back and really just kind of limit what I allow in. Right now, we only need so much information, unless you're in the healthcare field, like a few of you watching who are on the front lines. They need to be well informed. But if we're doing the things that we can, the few things actually that we have control over, then we don't need all the statistics. Like, we don't need to know all the data across the world that just adds to the fear that we're facing right now. Because there's multiple pandemics. Like there is this pandemic of fear and anxiety and worry, and unrest about all the uncertainty. And so, I think, how do you practice optimism during this time? Let's explore that. It's a little challenging. I don't have a list for that one. But I do think number one is that you have to be careful about who you're listening to, or you might love some of your friends, but they might be the most like sabotaging people because they're constantly worried. So you got to be careful, like how much time are you spending around that person or listening to that person. Obviously with anything, our faith, praying constantly. I like to always say this too, to feel more in control of your life, you have to take an assessment of what you're in control. Like you have to be able to look. I just had this conversation with my client because this person is feeling overwhelmed by there's all these life situations, and it's a lot of us right now. It's not just the virus, but it's uncertainty about finances and jobs and not knowing the future, like your summer vacation, like are you gonna have to cancel your trip, your seasons that are coming up, like will all these events happen? All this is going into one pot together, and it's creating this like huge recipe of like overwhelming anxiety. And so what I really encourage people to do is like pull each of those things out one at a time and assess, where does that belong? Like, first of all, number one, which of those do you have control over? All right. And probably it's only a few. So you take everything else, you remove it. You say, I'm going to either pray about it or I'm not going to worry about it. Okay. And then you got to look at, well, we need to prioritize. So I like using the matrix thing from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He uses that prioritizing matrix in looking at what is important and urgent, important, not urgent, urgent, not important, or neither, or, it's 4 different tiers. And so we obviously want to address, like, first and foremost, what do I need to do, take action against right now to establish the best possible outcomes? That's like I think an optimist is good at doing that, is looking at what do we need to address right now in this moment, and let's focus our attention there. And we're not going to let all those other things pull me away, because half of them I don't have control over, and then even more like aren't even that important. So I think that's a big part of it, separating what you have control over from what you don't, having faith, trusting God with the rest. And then, I think I've been encouraging people as well to take a moment to remove themselves from the situation. If you're doing those things that are within your ability right now, we don't need to drown in all the information. If you're like at home and you've got extra time, we don't need to spend that time wading through all of the data. You need to, I've encouraged people, look at some old photo albums of a time, like of a trip that you had a great time. In fact, I want to remind you, I just finished our video from the Teresa trip from last fall, and I have not laughed so much. Like, there was so much laughter, and it was so fun. Like, I experienced so much joy just from seeing all those videos and reliving that time. So I've encouraged people, think of a time in your life that it brought you so much joy, okay? And then go back and look at pictures. Listen to songs that remind you of that, or songs that remind you of a better time in life. And I'm not saying, like, use these things to distract you from what you should be taking action towards. Like, it is not an escape from responsibility. But it's just like a little self-care moment, maybe for 15 minutes a day or whatever, as you're taking care of business. Listen to music that puts you in a better state of mind, that creates encouragement and that optimistic outlook. Or I've also said, look the other way. Instead of being like, great, be present in the moment enough to manage what needs to be taken care of, but don't be so immersed in the moment that you're drowning in it too. So either reminisce about some days of old, or make some plans for the future, but kind of make them indefinitely. Like, that's what I've told people, say, hey, do some research and come up with some places that you would love to go visit, or some goals that you want to achieve in the future, and just don't put a date on them. Like, don't make it concrete so you're not disappointed, but just give yourself some ideas, or plan some details that you can right now, and leave the rest out. But sort of just kind of remove yourself from this time and remind yourself that, first of all, like, we've made it through difficult situations in the past, and we've lived some pretty incredible experiences. So we've proven to ourselves this is possible, and that's gonna spark optimism right there. Confidence comes from the proof of having achieved something before, right? And this is unique in itself, but we have come through enormous challenges as a society in the past, persevered, and and here we are again. So we can look ahead with the reassurance and knowing that we're going to come out of this. So envision that future. Like, play a little bit like Viktor Frankl approach to it. So Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor from concentration camp that wrote an amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning. And it's the whole idea is that he used his psychological approach, like this I guess you could say, I mean, probably not positive. I think it was more optimism because it was forward looking. He was able to plant this very confident idea in his mind of what life is going to be like after he got out of the concentration camp, even though the situation looked very, very dim. So, like, this is nothing in comparison unless you are directly impacted, right? Like, if you're in a concentration camp, like, we can't even put those things on the same page. So, the fact that he was able to use his thoughts to manifest a optimistic outlook for the future, paint that picture in his mind, and that helped him survive. Like, that's an incredible testimony right there. So I think that shows the power of, creating that vision in your mind and not just looking at the current situation. Like, he could have looked at it and been like, well, this isn't so bad. Like, clearly that would have been lying to himself. He was saying, well, right now where I'm at is not good, but let's take my mind out of the current and focus it on things of the future that I want to accomplish. And that gave him the presence of mind and the optimism to press on and ultimately survive as well. He was also very resourceful and resilient and had plenty of other great traits. But so yeah, I know some people are over here chiming in about things like there's things coming up that we go to every summer, and are those things going to happen because there's thousands of people there and we don't know. And I do think that's important to bring this up quickly, is that we have to we don't want to think about oh my gosh, is that going to happen or get canceled? Like, don't take yourself into that. But think about, at some point, those things will happen again. Like, those annual events will reoccur, all right? We're an impatient society, so we struggle to wait, right? I've already had 2 conferences canceled, but you know what? I've found some alternatives. Like, I would have learned and networked there. So I've just found alternative ways to learn and network, and they're actually a lot cheaper because they don't involve flights and hotels and all that. So yeah, I'll be eagerly awaiting the opportunity to go again. And we were just messaging earlier about, like, are we going to get to go on our annual Teresa Scott fall trip? Like, what does that look like? It's 5-6 months it would be from now. I mean, we would certainly hope, but we don't know. And so I think, again, you get to be careful not letting yourself be overwhelmed or overtaken by the uncertainty and nature of things. You can look forward to things with sort of a vague approach, or you can look back at memories from the past and know that there'll be more opportunities to make those memories in the future. But right now we've got to come together for the greater good of mankind, and just maintaining an optimistic outlook on things. But that involves taking action and also finding your responsibility in the matter, and not just trying to look at this situation through rose-colored glasses. Now, I do think there are a lot of positives that are coming out of this. That doesn't necessarily make it like a good thing. I think that those are the people with an optimistic mindset or growth mindset are able to look at this situation and see how they can gain from it. Someone who just wanted to look at it and label it as positive probably is just deceiving themselves. So we are doing a virtual trip, I am being told over here. That sounds interesting. See, like, it just, you gotta adapt. That was another thing. Teresa was great at adapting to change on the fly. She was a master of that. Be curious to see how she would be navigating this current situation. But glad to be able to come on and talk about our friend Teresa and just kind of look at her character strengths and what we can learn from those, and I think the ability to have an optimistic outlook on things is so key, and being able to understand too that it's important to take risk, and you got to be willing to take detours and look at things from a different perspective as well. And then that whole desire for adventure, the wanderlust thing. I wrote a little something on my Instagram post. It's on my Foresight Wellness page on Facebook too. I talked about how today's society, like so many of our moves are dictated. Like every turn, we're told what to do. I mean, literally and figuratively, like GPS, yes, but I'm saying like there's a template for everything, and that leaves so little room for us to use or demonstrate our creativity and explore and discover new things and like use our adventure spirit. And I think that a lot of people never get to really express themselves and never achieve their full potential because they're kept inside this box. Like their thought process is so narrow, and they're just kind of shuffled down this path. And I guess essentially you could almost say like the Viktor Frankl approach. It's kind of a dark way to look at it, but you think about Viktor Frankl in the concentration camp, and everyone's just kind of like shuffled along into these really dark circumstances. They're moved to the point of their death, like in these lines as prisoners. And he, while he was physically in that process, was able to remove his mind from it and really think beyond the situation. And I think that that's what's great. But so many people today can't think beyond this like status quo, and so they're stuck in this, living their life in this box. And that's not where Teresa was. Like, she was very imaginative and expressive, and so she was able to see all these opportunities and explore life at such a deeper level. And I think that wanderlust trait is incredible, but it doesn't exist in a lot of people. And so many people miss out. I have a lot of people tell me like, my life looks so exciting, and they envy all that I get to do all these things. And it's like, there's nothing, I don't know if maybe envy is the word, but like, the whole idea is that there's nothing special about me. It's just that I've chosen to go for it. And these other people could experience the same thing, but I think they have more of a closed mindset, and so they just don't even allow themselves those opportunities, or they fear the risk involved. And fear is very, very damaging. It holds us back from so many opportunities for growth in life. And then reliability, reliability is kind of a rare trait anymore too. It's hard to trust anyone. So I appreciate that Teresa exhibited all of these awesome qualities and demonstrating for us that we could try to learn from her, and look forward to continuing our travels and our adventures in each fall, and just kind of see where that leads us. And that's the whole idea as well. See where life leads you. Kind of be willing to go with the flow. Teresa used the term duncing, and that basically meant that we're going to leave time to just we're going to leave some space open to go where the road leads us, and be okay with that, and like, I can definitely say I've been on some of these trips to where we've taken some wrong turns, but we have decided to make it the right turn by just going for it. And it's been some rocky, rough, and narrow roads, but I tell you what, it gives you a lot of good stories to tell that paved highways would not. So that's something too that adventure spirit leads to. Michael, I'm not really sure. Interesting concept. Could you imagine we should do a takeover this weekend? Oh, yeah, I don't know if we want to rebel and go on a trip. Aloise, you're welcome. So thank you for watching. But yes, so again, thanks to Teresa for being a light in our lives and encouraging us to face our fears and be adventurous, and to chase our natural need for curiosity and exploration. So thanks for watching, guys, and we're going to come back together throughout the week and talk more mental health topics and ways that we can optimize our health as we work through the COVID-19 situation together. If you guys have ideas for different topics, let me know. Questions, I'll roll through over here on the comments and try to work through some of the senseless banter from some of my travel friends. But I am grateful for their presence. So I will say, our last adventure was to Oregon. So I told you where I went with Teresa, twice to the Grand Canyon, hiking across and back, and then the Havasu Indian Reservation, and then the Zion Narrows. And then we went to Mount Washington in New Hampshire and hiked to the top of Mount Washington the fall after we lost Teresa, and that was 2018. And then the fall of last year, in 2019, we went to Oregon, and we spent 12 days in the back of a camper van, and that was a first for me. That was a pretty incredible experience, though. We were immersed in the wilderness, and I will say that it was different from a Teresa trip because we didn't have one designated 48-mile hike. It was a lot of spontaneity, though, and that aligned with, like, we pretty much danced the whole time. So there was elements of Teresa in that regard. There are strengths Teresa had that I don't think we can carry on as well. But I think that that's okay because the intentions are good and the adventurous spirit is still there. She was impeccable at like planning and getting up early and getting us on the trail and keeping us on a mission. We're gonna keep being adventurous. I'm not sure how if we're gonna be getting up at 4 a.m. But we're gonna keep it alive though, and I love that. And we had this group of people who are involved with Teresa's brother Bill and her nieces, Lainey and Michael, especially, who we went to Oregon together last fall, and what an incredible trip. And actually, like I said earlier, I finished the video from that trip. So if you guys have a free 53 minutes in your life, which right now I know you do, you have plenty of extra time, and you want some laughs, and you would like to see some video from our adventure to Oregon last fall, there's my the videos on my YouTube page at Derek Forsyth, and it is 53 minutes long, but it's worth your time. You're going to see that we spent most of our time lost on very rough roads, fighting in the kitchen on the back of the van, or sometimes hiking in the rain, and that's pretty much probably sums it up. But it's comical for us. Maybe it'll provide you some comic relief too. But hey, we would never have those memories if it wasn't for Teresa to get us started. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I appreciate the feedback. Let's talk again soon. And thanks again, Teresa, for shining a light on our lives. Have a good night.